and to give you, thanks Claire, a quick update on what's going on with the Communities Creating Homes team at the Wales Co-op Centre. So maybe I'll start with that. Mixed news really. We've been, on a positive side, we've been fortunate enough to be granted further money from Welsh Government to continue acting as a hub to enable and encourage the development of community-led housing in Wales, which is fantastic news. So we are funded for the next 3 years. The funding is slightly more than we were receiving before from Welsh Government, but with the loss of our other key funder, which comes to an end in April, we have a slightly smaller budget than before. So we've had to make some changes to the way that the programme will run in future. So we've restructured the team somewhat, which sadly means that Dave Palmer, who I don't think he's here actually, but has been an integral figure in the development of community-led housing in Wales, will be moving on from the team. And also Nick Perkins, who is here representing the DTA, who've been successfully running the Explore part of our programme, will be ending the relationship with DTA come the end of this month. Well, while she's here, a quick opportunity to say a huge thanks to Nick for all the fantastic work she's put in over the last few years to develop the sector and move groups forward. Moving on to the purpose of the session. I haven't introduced myself, have I? Sorry. I'm Hugh, I'm the project manager for Communities Creating Homes. Yeah, we've run sessions this year at the network on community access to land, on community groups accessing finance. Of course, Chris, you feel free to switch off your camera as you see fit. Yeah, we've run sessions so far on community access to land and on finance, the key issues for community groups seeking to develop their homes, and wanted to focus a session on something maybe a bit more inspiring and less of a focus on obstacles and barriers, and more on what the art of the possible, I suppose, what can be done, what changes are going on in the world of construction and development that might inspire groups in Wales to think about what their plans are for developing homes. So with that in mind, we've got a fantastic trio of speakers who will be presenting on a variety of areas around that topic, who I'll introduce shortly. Darren Hatton, who's the head of innovative housing at Welsh Government, will be up first. Darren has to leave at 2, so we're going to have a few questions. If you have questions for Darren, please, you'll have an opportunity to throw those at him after he's presented on what we've learned from the innovative housing programme so far. We're then going to hear from Scotland and England, Helen and Martin, who are representing respectively entire nations there, on successful developments over the border, led by community groups, again with an eye to inspiring groups in Wales to think about how they might approach their builds, and maybe throw in some different considerations to what have been going through people's heads already. I run this session in the full knowledge that we are in a different position to people in Scotland and in England, that we face different challenges and barriers, and that, as I say, we have touched on those in the last couple of sessions. But this session is to maybe give us a little bit more, well, I don't know, positive outlook, something to look forward to further down the road. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Darren at this stage. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Hugh. Thanks for that. I think it's probably first, before I share my screen as well, to say the learning from the Innovative Housing Programme is continuous. So the slides now, yes, it's what we're learning to date around the Innovative Housing Programme and the schemes we funded. But there is a whole official monitoring and evaluation of the programme that I might touch upon during the presentation towards the end. And gladly come back in the future to present more formal findings or evolving findings from the Innovative Housing Programme. We don't feel that what we've got to date is wrong, but we just want them reaffirmed as the monitoring and evaluation of the programme goes forward. So I'll start sharing my screen now and get into the presentation. I don't know if everyone can see the slides. Hopefully that's cheers, Martin,
yeah.
thumbs up. So I'm Darren Hatton. I'm head of innovative housing within Welsh Government. I've been running the Innovative Housing Programme in Welsh Government since June 2018. The programme itself is closed now to new applicants, so there is no sort of large capital funding pot for that. But my background is in stats and research, so it was one of the reasons I was brought into the programme. We're spending an awful lot of money on capital on new build housing to understand what Welsh Government should fund in future. But it was the wraparound of the monitoring and evaluation of the programme was key, because if we don't get that sorted, we'll look back on the IHP programme in sort of 5 to 10 years' time and think, well, that was great. It created a load of novel schemes and houses, and we never really built on it. So if I jump into the presentation, the Innovative Housing Programme was actually launched by Carl Sargent as the Housing and Local Government Minister back in 2017. And in short, it was to test and learn future housing solutions. And a mission by us as government, we didn't know what the future housing solutions were, but what we wanted to do was to wrap around a programme where we were said, let's move on from traditional. If we keep doing things the same way, we'll always get the same results, and things needed to change in the construction sector. When the programme first launched, it was actually for 2 years, and there was a 20 million capital grant pot available. I'm really pleased that when we came in and took over the team in June 2018, we already had huge demand for the programme. And the programme was expanded, and it became a 3-year programme with £90 million of funding. We've now managed to stretch that to four years and £155 million of funding. And across the course of those 4 years, we've funded 64 developments and delivering around 2,000 low and zero carbon homes. And I think the key thing is around low and zero carbon. We need to test whether those truly are zero carbon houses or whether they're low carbon houses, or and it's around the language of zero carbon, whether they are net zero ready houses, which suggests that as the grid decarbonizes in future years, that those houses may transition from being a low carbon house to a zero carbon house. So I think that's a sort of key thing around terminology. Again, programme was launched to challenge the traditional approaches and break up the status quo. As the years progressed, it's fair to say the level of innovation of housing that we funded in the first year didn't blow anyone away. There was a lot of passive house funded, which has been a standard for about 20 years. It just wasn't being done very much in the UK. It's also fair to say that a description of modern methods of construction is a real big catch-all for non-traditional, and lots of it is not modern. Although people don't like using the word prefab, a lot of it is in the same style as prefab solutions that were seen after the Second World War. There was, between the wars as well. So there is lots to unpick there with modern methods of construction, and a lot of what we mean is sort of moving away from traditional. And what we also wanted to see was more timber in construction. It may be not a stated aim when it launched in 2017, but when the programme finished, it was a very keen aim of ours to ensure that we got more Welsh timber and construction grade timber into social house building, which is something that I think Scotland are really ahead of the game of across the UK nations. With, again, in terms of the programme, speeding up delivery of the homes, tackling fuel poverty and reducing carbon emissions, breaking up the status quo, and also, as the years rolled on, it was an improving of the supply chain and upskilling of existing workforce, were big things from the programme. So our journey through the Innovative Housing Programme towards net zero and our next steps, it really started back in 2015 with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act in Wales, instrumental in the step change in everything we do as a government going forward, and how when the programme launched 2 years later, it was entirely wrapped around the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. I'm sure lots of people in Wales are familiar, but sort of colleagues in England and Scotland, there are 7 wellbeing goals, and all our policies and legislation need to wrap around these. So they're the 7 goals. It's very interesting around making a housing programme wrap around that. How does building a house link in with a vibrant culture, etc.? And I think this is probably the group who will give you the answer, exactly why co-ops are important to make sure that there is a thriving culture and community. So there was lots of things that how we mapped and translated delivering a house or housing development and how it meets these 7 wellbeing goals. Going forward on our journey forward, the Innovative Housing Programme really give us a confidence as government that in May of last year, when the government was formed, and then following on that to June, when the programme for government targets were announced, to change the target from 20,000 affordable homes to be built in a Senedd term to 20,000 low carbon socially rented homes. There's a key difference, I think, between affordable and social. The affordable included lots of houses built under Help to Buy, which I think contributed about 6,000 homes towards that 20,000 target. Now we're saying social, so we've increased that target in effect from 14,000 to 20. And the key element and the difficult to achieve is the low carbon. So for this assembly term, we've treated low carbon as equal in EPC-A or SAP, in old money SAP rating of 92 plus. There are lots of arguments over are EPCs the right measures for going towards net zero. I'm fairly clued up on that, and it's why when I come to the 5th bullet point, we'll mention around that. But basically, every house we fund, there's a requirement to be low carbon as an EPC-A. Also included in programme for government, I'm sure for this group, the explicit support for cooperative housing, community-led initiatives, and CLTs. In addition, in terms of the other things we've been doing as a government, back in March 2020, just on the cusp, or it's February 2020, so it was pre-pandemic, we introduced the MMC strategy from within my team to increase the use and pace of delivery of MMC solutions for social rent. In March 2021 was the implementation plan and what financial levers and what we were hoping to achieve with the MMC strategy, and how we progressed that. In October last year, we introduced the Welsh Design Quality Requirement 2021. So if anyone wants to access social housing grant in Wales, they have to hit WDQR 2021. It's a historic standard, was DQR 2005. It hadn't been updated for a long, long time. You have to hit EPC-A, and that's quite an achievable target to hit EPC-A. And it's really achievable if you choose to use a gas boiler, because of the way the modelling works for SAP ratings and EPC ratings. It takes into account the cost of the energy used. But within WDQR, we put a ban on fossil fuel heating for your space heating and hot water for all new social house building. And that was the first of the UK nations to take that step. What it does mean quite cleverly is that it's much harder to hit EPCA ratings with electrification of heat. It means you've got to do more with the fabric of the house first before you look to do other things. And in terms of heat pumps, whether that's air or ground source heat pumps, that you've really got to make sure that that house has got a low energy demand right from the off. So it means spending more on getting a better quality house, which is also pushing down the avenue of encouraging more MMC solutions. Wrapped around that, so yes, we've got to do more social housing, we've got to do it to a better standard, was a record announcement of social housing grant funding, which was this year it's 300 million, I think it's 325 million next year, 330 million the year after, which links into the Affordable Housing Review 2019 around giving certainty of funding for people rather than just announcing sort of budgets on a yearly basis. There was a program of work going forward to say, these are our budgets over the next few years. And I think from our point of view, it's really good the ministers have put their money where their mouth is, to say there is lots of money on the table to meet these targets. Specifically then for this group and learning around MMC funding schemes under the Innovative Housing Programme, I'm not going to lie to people. Doing modern methods of construction is tough first time out. People get the benefits of MMC in terms of a reduced build time in program. People saying it's going to reduce your build program by 20 to 60%. You'll get those houses so much quicker. It never really translates on the very first time. And what we've done under the Innovative Housing Programme is got a lot of local authorities and housing associations to have taken their first time through that journey. Lots of them come back with criticisms to turn around and say, it took as long as traditional. I don't know why I've done it. It was hard work. I can tell you from examples with homelessness during COVID that Cardiff Council had one MMC solution that got dropped on site really, really quickly. And the same solution on a different site has taken as long as traditional to deliver. And that was to do with the inexperience of the MMC provider to do all the groundworks on the site. We've got an example where, again, this is Cardiff Council. The groundworks on the site took 6 months to do. It was a difficult site. The 9 houses got dropped in 5 days. That was the speed. It would have taken 6 months to have done those houses. Traditionally, it took 5 working days to drop those 18 modules to make 9 houses in. And then it took about 4 weeks to commission electric hookup to the grid, waste and water, commission the sprinkler system and do fence panels out the back and turfing. Took another 4 or 5 weeks. So there was the kind of speed of build you can get has been really impressive. There's another example in Newport where 12 one-bed flats got dropped in 4 days using MMC techniques. If you get the right MMC providers who are experienced and you do it right from the off, you can genuinely get really impressive build times compared to traditional. It's also fair to say the supply chain across the UK, this isn't a Wales thing, is relatively immature for MMC solutions, and it needs nurturing. So yesterday I was in Bristol to look at a Bocklock, which is a product which has got IKEA's involvement in it. It was an impressive development. Build times 50% quicker than traditional. But what I was really interested was that it wasn't coming from their own factory. It was coming from a factory called Top Hat. And actually Top Hat do a lot of production for lots of people and it gets badged as something else. So there's those kind of things to to understand is that although there's lots of suppliers out there, they're not all manufacturing from their own factories. They're buying in product from somewhere else. Key thing as well is around cost versus value, and they are not the same. And I think that's a key thing to say. Traditional is cheaper than MMC solutions. I think everyone needs to go in with their eyes open on that. But there is something different between cost and value. The MMC product will get you a precise factory built quality build compared to a house built in a field, in effect. And we always use the example of the car industry. You don't see many cars being built in the field. They are factory precision built, and there are processes in place to ensure quality control before it gets to site. The other thing is, if you have got a house with very low running costs going forward, and we're talking about an energy crisis now where from 1st of April prices go up, that the average bill could be £2,000 a year. In October, not to scare monger, but the prices could go up again, and we could be talking around £2,500 per year to heat your house. We have funded MMC solutions under the Innovative Housing Programme, which are generating income for tenants. There are some that are having bills that are around about £20 a month. But the payback period for paying more for the quality and valuing that quality means that those houses for tenants they are low carbon houses, and the tenants got low energy bills. And under the programme, obviously funded social housing, you've got some of the most vulnerable people being able to make sure that they've got money in their pockets for essentials like food and clothing for their children, rather than concerning themselves with another utility bill, is really key. The other good thing to say is around MMC solutions continue to improve with each iteration. The example yesterday when I went to see the scheme in Bristol, their first block of apartments took 13 weeks to build, and they had some issue with water ingress during the weather, and they were able to evaluate what had happened, and there was parts missing during the factory build that was noted, but no one noted it on site, and it caused issue. The second block of apartments took 6 weeks to deliver, exactly the same size apartments. The efficiencies and the learning on those iterations is great, because it's the same product going in multiple iterations. And it's fair to say with traditional, you could have probably taken a builder or a bricklayer from 100 years ago and transport them now, and they would fit in on a building site quite well on the traditional. There's not been huge improvements or step change iteration in the traditional construction. I've covered about sort of reduction in program delivery. Again, I think that comes with doing it in iterations. Mentioned around sort of higher quality, we've definitely seen that in the Innovation Housing Programme with the MMC solutions, that the people being highly impressed with schemes and very few snags, or where there has been snagging, they've been fixed fairly quickly. We are definitely seeing better building performance. It's a little bit difficult doing comparisons to chalk and cheese when it comes to traditional against the MMC solutions, but in terms of real life examples, we had a family in a social house that had 170 a month energy bills, and they had a disabled daughter. Not going into too much details, but in terms of they had quite high energy demands in their house. They've moved into an MMC solution that was funded under IHP. Their monthly energy bills now are £18, not 170, but they have also reported significant improvements with some of the difficulties with their daughter's respiratory illnesses. So It isn't just a warm, eco-friendly and cheap to run house. It is a healthy house as well, and that will have additional benefits. And the other thing great for circular economy for us is a demonstrable, a measurable amount of reduction in site waste. So the houses, the picture there is, I think, of low field timbers roof structure going into a scheme we funded in Powys. I haven't put a photo, but there was a scheme run by Down to Earth in Swansea where they basically had the wood waste from the flooring being able to be put into one bag. You're not seeing skip after skip leaving the construction site with waste material. Yes, you do get waste, but there's a lot less waste. We've got a factory we've supported in Neath Port Talbot, So Modular, where the waste wood from the panelized system is shredded on site and pushed into the biomass boiler, which heats the main building, but is also being fed in through a district heat system to other factories. The waste ash from the biomass boiler is currently then used as an insulation layer between under the flooring of the buildings, so modular building, but they're also using some of that and mixing it with cement to patch up the roadworks around the factory. So there is the waste product being recycled into biomass, and then the waste from the biomass also then going into products as well. So there's some really good stories with the programme, but that's probably less for Wales Co-op. The good thing from our point of view is there are already low and zero carbon housing solutions that already exist. Touching on the monitoring and evaluation from the programme, it was a large programme at 155 million of capital. We've put in 1.2 million of monitoring equipment into these houses funded through Innovate UK. And we have around about 1.2 million of resource from the Active Building Centre, looking into the data, creating the platforms, so that we've got the data and we can understand them and understand which houses that we funded work best, what we should fund in future. And that is going to inform WDQR 2023. You might have picked up, it took a long time to improve DQR from 2005 to 21. There's now a 2-year cycle based on data coming out of the Innovative Housing Programme to ensure that WDQR 2023 and then 2025 links in with a Part L review. IHP has also highlighted we really need to upskill existing workforce in low carbon technologies. We need to improve the supply chain for low carbon products such as the Welsh timber sector. And there's a timber industrial strategy being published at the moment. We need and would really like to land some heat pump manufacturers in Wales. The offer for them is that we're looking to do 20,000 low carbon socially homes in the next 5 years. But not only that, we have plans to retrofit the 225,000 social homes that already exist between now and 2030. And look, we're actively pushing to break up the status quo with new entrances into the house building sector. I was in France last week for MIPIM. I've never been before. Up until about 2 months, I didn't know MIPIM existed, but it was the largest housing building conference in the world. And we went out there and we've come back with some real good leads to get more MMC into Wales. But the biggest thing, and what I've said from the outset under IHP, until we can fix the valuation and warranties issues linked to MMC, we are going to hinder MMC being normalised. So the future housing solutions, if you can't get a mortgage for them, they're not a future housing solution in my books. It's around valuers valuing the innovation that we're funding rather than valuing it as traditional. and it's around securing those warranties. And there is a process with NHBC called NHBC Accepts, and we're trying to get more and more of the schemes that we supported under IHP through that process, because that opens the door then for being able to secure mortgages and finance these houses going forward.
Darren, sorry to cut in,
Yep.
but just to respond to a question that's come up in the chat, can you just get into just a little bit more the background to valuation and warranty issues? What are those? Why are they holding back innovation in housing?
So we funded, to give a sort of live example, we funded an open market scheme in St Fagans called Live Eco. We funded the third phase with ground source heat pumps, MVHR systems and solar panels. And they had a non-traditional appearance to those houses in the first floor and the roof structure. So they weren't tiled and bricked, basically, although they were traditional construction. But because the facade was non-traditional, the RICS valuation come back as nil, which meant you couldn't get a mortgage on them. In addition, the NHBC didn't hadn't certified them for a warranty, which meant you really limited the amount of mortgage providers. So that was the double whammy. They did get LABC provide the warranty on those houses, which opened up the mortgages. But when I discussed with Sam Rees, who's the RICS lead for Wales, we had an interesting conversation on what the valuation was. Was it 0 or was it nil? Because they have, if a valuer values it as nil, it means they can't place a value on that product. If they value it as 0, it means it's got no value and therefore shouldn't be offered a mortgage. And my argument back to Sam was nil and 0 in most lay people's terms are exactly the same meaning. The value of the land is probably 50-60% of the value of the house in St Fagans, and yet the valuer hadn't valued the land. So we did find someone who did value the land and value the properties, but that's the issue, and it's a real simple one to sort out and needs sort of direction from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors to issue further things around that. The warranties issue and post-Grenfell is a much more difficult one to crack, because there are many MMC solutions out there, whether it's volumetric or panelized. But now in terms of fire tests, you've got to test the whole system. So if you have got, it's fine, it might pass the fire test as one module, but you need to put it together as it would appear on site and fire test it as well. So there are things around that and warranties, which I find startling, because the NHBC accepts process and NHBC have acknowledged that a lot of these factory built houses are doing really, really well with the standards. There is a bit of a knowledge gap there that NHBC is filling and learning about. But yet we know how many faults and snags you get from traditional built houses that are still certified, still getting warranties from NHBC. You get scare stories of 200 plus defects on a new build house. On average, it's like 30, 40 or 50 snags per new build house. And yet those warranties are being given out like confetti by NHBC. So there are conversations we are having as government with RICS and with NHBC to ensure that we can get the process so that these MMC solutions can be warranted. If they get the warranty, there'll also be the valuations and the mortgages will come then. So it's a difficult one because NHBC captures the market for mortgages. If NHBC gives it the tick, you've got a whole market approach for mortgages, basically. There is the other thing around valuers. We have funded a project in Cardiff, so there has been something called the Lenders project in Wales that was done. So we've now got a valuers project linked to one of the IHP schemes, linked to green mortgages. So if you, one of the schemes, we've part funded the innovation in the open market, and the person who buys the house has got two options. In effect, they can take out a green mortgage and pay more for the house, but they benefit from the lower energy bills that the house generates. Or the person purchasing the house can make the choice to not pay for the innovation, but they will not benefit from the lower energy bill, and they'll actually be put on an average energy bill. And the average energy bill difference between the low energy billed house and an average will be them making payments for the innovation over the lifetime. So you're basically putting the ball into the purchaser's choice on what they do, and we're using that as evidence to then go back to RICS to say people do appreciate the they have to pay extra to get better quality, and show them that they should be valuing in these innovations. But the key learning for me under IHP for a zero carbon approach is you've got to do as much as possible to make sure that house has the lowest energy demand to start with, because sort of the climate change emergency means everyone's got to do the most they can, rather than do the minimum and expect maybe the grid to decarbonize, and it's just kicking the can down the road. It's someone else's problem.
Great, thanks, Darren. Look, we've run over a bit. We're okay for a couple of minutes, and we've got a couple more questions in the Q&A, which I'll throw at you if you don't mind. Both relate back to this issue evaluation, and then we'll bring in a couple more. I can see Tracy has a hand up. We'll go with Chrissy's first. Timescales for NHBC giving this the green light, and I'll throw in one from Wallace as well. Have there been any issues with the willingness of private lenders to fund MMC other than valuations?
So yes, if I take the willingness of private lenders, there has been difficulty, and why IHP managed to spend 155 million is because we turned around to our housing associations and said, if you, in the fourth year, everything we want to fund is MMC. If you have any issues with the private sector not lending you money for the MMC because of warranty issues, come back to us as government and we will mortgage them. So we gave grant for the innovation, and we also give loan money to our housing associations to fund what they would normally fund in the private sector. So we have seen difficulties with private lenders to fund MMC. In terms of NHBC timescales for green lights, I do think it's a process which I think Bocklock took maybe 18 months to go through, and Bocklock were the first. So expectation is that those timescales would reduce going forward. And we've got one or two in Wales going through that process at the moment.
Great, thanks, Darren. Tracy, do you want to come in?
First of all, I've left a message on your landline, Darren, but so I'll go into detail later. Broadly, I'm trying to enable a development which is led by biodiversity. So I note with innovative housing, it's largely met by current regulations and eco-techs in effect. Have you got provision, and would you extend into innovative housing sites that led by nature, which is governed by nature risk underlying climate change?
So I suppose IHP tested lots of different innovations, and so we do have two biophilic living concepts funded under the Innovative Housing Programme, one in Cardiff which has had issues with contractors, but it should be getting on site again in 2 weeks' time, which is the cross-laminated timber tower on City Road. And then the other one is Biophilic Live in Swansea, which is Picton Yard being developed by Hacer Developments. So that includes sort of fish tanks on the ground floor, where the waste from the fish tanks is fertilizing plants in a soilless solution on the walls. But yeah, there are other funds for biodiversity linked to housing developments that I'm aware of that we can link you up with. The Innovative Housing Programme itself, it was closed to new applicants from last April. We're doing the monitoring and evaluation now and that programme, but it doesn't mean the door is shut for IHP. Our minister is the climate change minister. This is her space, and she is very keen and motivated to ensure that we continue to test and learn. So it's not like it's a closed door for the Innovative Housing Programme. We're looking for schemes potentially coming forward next year, and that we can announce a fresh pot of money after 2 years of not having any capital. So,
thank you. That's wonderful.
Do you see any crossover, Darren, between the aim to support CLTs, co-ops, and community-led housing, and potential to do some different stuff with IHP? I suppose
yeah, definitely.
The minister, but
so I suppose this comes into the awkward. I'm a temporary head of innovative housing in Welsh Government, and I believe the role is until May of this year. There has been conversations around if I'd secured the head of innovative housing permanently, I wanted to take cooperative and community-led housing under the innovative housing area. Look, our job is to take and I don't mean this in a bad way, but take the niche in housing and try and make it more mainstream. So for MMC, when it launched in 2017, I probably had 1% of all housing being modern methods of construction in Wales. Next year, via social housing grant, the application process is 39% of applicants are looking to use MMC solutions. So if that's a quantifier of success, I think we're doing all right. But it's about getting the right MMC. Similarly, our minister's got ambition for more community-led housing. There are countless examples in other countries around people doing more self-build, more cooperative-led housing than we do in Wales. And that's one of the things for me as a government official, is being honest and saying things like self-build Wales haven't been a success. That got launched a couple of years ago. I haven't seen an awful lot from that. And under IHP, we had two sort of community or co-op schemes. One with United Welsh is probably stretching it to say it was a co-op, but has been delivered and been successful. And then there was another one down in Broncaf in Pembrokeshire, which we gave additional money for to make that a CLT, and seemed to have dropped by the wayside. The houses got delivered, but the CLT element of it didn't, which was hugely disappointing, and taking the learning from that. So,
right, we'll talk further. My dog and baby both kicking off at exactly the same time right now. So I'm going to very swiftly thank you, Darren, and hand over to Helen from Mullen Iona Community Trust to take us through your experiences in Scotland of delivering affordable housing.
Thank you. Can you, someone allow me to share my screen?
Yeah, Claire, can you sort that? Don't worry, Darren, it's great. Thank you very much.
There you go. You should be able to now. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can everyone see that? Thanks very much for having me. It's really great to be here and learn more about the affordable housing sector in Wales. I found myself nodding along to pretty much everything Darren was saying there. I'm on the Isle of Mull, which is on the west coast of Scotland. We have a population of about 3,000. It's a reasonably accessible island in Scottish terms. We've got 3 ferry routes to the mainland. and a return trip to Glasgow, for example, is possible in a day. We have challenges around a reliance on tourism, lack of infrastructure, ferry issues, an ageing population, and limited childcare. We have a very buoyant and enterprising economy. However, it is completely constrained by a lack of homes, a really high proportion of holiday lets and second houses, and a very expensive housing market. I work for Mull and Iona Community Trust, or MICT, which is one of Scotland's longest established development trusts. We've delivered a broad range of social, economic and environmental projects over the last 25 years. We have Scotland's longest running community-led ranger service, an office building with rooms for hire and home to the island's charity shop, light industrial park, pontoon and motorhome stances for visitors, a community transport scheme, and we recently bought a forest. Sustainability and reducing our carbon footprint are really important aspects of what we do. We've run many environmental projects. We have a hydro scheme from which the profits are distributed locally, and all our 5 vehicles are electric. We've delivered 2 affordable housing projects at Ulva Ferry on Mull, which is what I was going to talk about today. So Ulva Ferry is a dispersed community of around 120 people on the west coast of Mull. It is a really beautiful area. The whole area is a designated national scenic area. It's the gateway to Staffa and the Tresnish Isles, and very popular with wildlife enthusiasts. However, the area has no shop, pub, church or village hall, so all community life centres around the primary school. And back in 2010, the school roll fell to just 4 pupils and it was threatened with closure by the local council. Ulva School Community Association, or USCA, was formed in 2011, and they launched a really high-profile campaign and successfully fought to keep the school open. However, they soon realised that a lack of affordable housing options was causing people to move away, particularly families. And there were very few rental options locally. Much of the housing stock was old estate cottages, which were poorly maintained, expensive to heat, and tenants had zero security. Coupled with that, over 30% of the housing stock were holiday homes, so any available houses for sale were beyond local affordability to buy. USCA then had the ambition then to build houses for affordable rent, but they soon realised this was really beyond their scope as a community group, and the housing associations locally weren't interested, so they asked MICT for support in 2013. MICT secured funding from the Scottish Land Fund, which is a national lottery fund, to purchase land from a local farmer and appoint me as project officer in 2014. And then MICT managed the project on behalf of USCA and the wider community. There was a lot of community consultation throughout several years, and it was agreed to build 2 houses. Family-sized homes, bigger than minimum state space standards, because in very rural areas, people work and socialise in their homes much more so than in urban areas. They wanted passive house standard to address the fuel poverty issues prevalent locally, and they wanted a design in keeping with the local landscape and this national scenic area designation. Fast forward 3 years and 2 passive house standard 3-bedroom family homes were completed in June 2017. We used a local architect who are passive house certified and a local builder. We had a really complex funding package, including local authority and Scottish Government funding, grants from Quaker Housing Trust and Trust House Charitable Foundation, a mortgage with Triodos Bank, and an extra loan from Quaker Housing Trust to try and meet our shortfall. Plus, we received over £60,000 in donations through a crowdfunding campaign, which was just amazing. It was really difficult to convince funders of the benefits of passive house construction, that there was any housing need at all in the area, and why houses should be built outside a main settlement. At the time, there were few communities in Scotland actually delivering housing themselves, and the comparison was with social housing, which was very much geared towards volume building, as close to benchmark as possible, and not prioritising quality or looking at the longer term life cycle costs of homes. Well, benchmarks mean absolutely nothing when you're building on an island. Our quantity surveyor confirmed that our build costs were 25% higher than an equivalent build in the central belt of Scotland, due to additional ferry, infrastructure and labour costs. However, we were undeterred and determined to stick to the community's brief to build high quality houses, and eventually we secured all the funding we needed. The houses were constructed using a cross-laminated timber frame, which enabled a shorter construction period than traditional build, and all building materials are recyclable. The houses are light and airy airy, and they have significant solar gain from all the windows. The only heating source is from a towel rail in the bathroom. So these houses were the first passive house standard community-owned housing in Scotland. However, by the end of the project, we had no money left and we couldn't afford to go through the certification process. So we've actually lost out on the accolade of saying that. We increased the local primary school roll by 50%. We also increased the number of working age adults in the community. We won an award. We used a locally agreed allocation policy, which prioritised families in housing need, which directly supported the local school. And heating bills were worked out at being just £350 per year for our tenants. We charge a social rent level in line with our local housing associations, and we offer secure private residential tenancies. We received 8 applications for these 2 houses, which gave us the impetus to think about the housing need across Mull and embark on a second phase of housing. So as I say, there's major housing issues across Mull, so we just decided to crack on and started on our second affordable housing project literally as soon as our tenants moved in. We secured feasibility funding from Scottish Land Fund and Scottish Government's Rural and Islands Housing Fund. And this enabled us to carry out really robust business planning, including undertaking a topographic survey, architects' outline designs, pre-planning advice, housing needs survey, engineer survey, and flood risk assessment. We decided to go for a design and build contract this time round, whereby the contractor was responsible for the whole build, including planning and design and managing subcontractors, and a fixed price was agreed in advance. This gave us definitive costs and timescale from the outset and minimised our risk. We knew funding would be much harder to secure this time round, and we wanted to be less reliant on loan finance and donations. We held a lot of community consultation events with USCA and the wider community to work up designs and discuss allocations. We looked at various site options, and we were keen to explore modular construction options. Thanks to all this feasibility work, we successfully applied again to the Scottish Land Fund to buy a plot and part fund my post. We then worked closely with our quantity surveyor to create a design and build tender that specifically met the criteria of the Rural and Islands Housing Fund. So this is a Scottish Government fund for communities and private landowners building affordable homes to meet an evidenced housing need. It was agreed to build 2 3-bedroom and 2 2-bedroom homes, and while they would not be passive house standard, energy efficiency was still a very high priority for us as an organisation and for the community. The Wee House Company were the successful bidders, and their modular construction methods really appealed to us. So they prefabricate their houses at their factory in Ayrshire whilst carrying out site work simultaneously, and then the modules, which are 90% finished at this point, are taken to site for completion. Their construction methods enable a quicker build on site, minimising construction traffic and related emissions by up to 50% over the course of a development. And building in a factory setting also enables more efficient building methods and results in 80% less waste packaging than traditional sites, as Darren was talking about. The houses are EPC-B rated, achieved through a combination of high quality insulation, increased air tightness, and the use of solar PV panels. This also enabled us to secure a mortgage from Ecology Building Society, who demand an EPC-B rating for all new builds, but they're also really flexible. They offer loan terms of up to 40 years for community-led housing projects. We had a much more straightforward funding package for this second project. The majority of funding did come from the Rural and Islands Housing Fund and this mortgage from Ecology. We also had grants from our local authority and Scottish Hydroelectric Community Trust towards our £20,000 electricity connection costs. Our build costs actually turned out to be almost the same as phase 1, due in part to our significant infrastructure costs of the site, including flood risk management for a 1 in 200 year flood prediction. I think we have the biggest culvert on Mull, and drilling not 1 but 2 boreholes for our private water supply because the first borehole failed 2 days before our tenants moved in. So in total, the infrastructure costs were 1/3 of our overall build costs. Our 4 houses were complete in May last year. The pandemic and Brexit didn't really delay our project too much, thankfully, and thanks to the design and build contract, any additional unexpected costs were absorbed by the contractor and not us as the client. It would have been really difficult for us to secure any additional funding once the project was underway. I think the houses sit really well in the landscape. They complement our first houses, and the larch cladding will weather down relatively quickly, so they're unobtrusive. All our affordable housing that we've delivered has amazing views. We're very lucky. We had 31 applications for these 4 houses. They're energy efficient and sustainable. We increased the primary school roll by 50% again, to the point where the school has been able to employ a second-class teacher for the first time ever. We've increased the working age population again. We've won another award, and as with our other houses, we charge social rent levels. Our tenants have affordable heating bills and secure tenancies. We are a registered private landlord, and we do all our own housing management. We're the first point of contact for our tenants. We organise repairs, change of tenancy paperwork, and administration for when we advertise for applicants. This is a picture of our general manager suited up to fix a problem with a septic tank recently. This is really not in his job description at all. So we're now looking to create a facilities manager post. We're just a very small organisation, and we just sort of bumbling through doing a lot of this management stuff ourselves with a bit of support. Hopefully in time we can develop a facilities management service that we can offer to other community organisations locally. And also we need to consider how we cover the cost of management from a very limited budget when we're charging affordable rent and have a mortgage to service. I think that's a challenge that often gets overlooked at the beginning of a community-led housing project. Our allocation policies are agreed with community members. We have a steering group who review our rents annually. And we do have support from a local housing association, both with our allocations, and they provide an emergency out of hours service for our tenants. It's really important as a private landlord to understand landlord legislation and the responsibilities that go with it. We are members of the Scottish Associations of Landlords. I don't know what the equivalent is in Wales, but they have really good advice, training courses and sample documents you can download. So we've built 6 houses. Is that the problem solved? Well, no. The housing crisis has worsened on Mull, as it has across the Highlands and Islands of Scotland and arguably throughout the UK. There's been a huge increase in short-term lets and second homes on Mull. We're losing houses to the short-term let market far quicker than we can build or retain them. There's been a real decrease in private long-term lets as changes to tenancy legislation puts people off being a landlord. We recently relet one of our 2-bedroom houses and received 13 applications from people living on Mull in real, genuine housing need. The social housing register doesn't quite capture this reality or the needs of people moving to Mull to take up key jobs. We're currently undertaking a key worker accommodation study across Mull and Iona. We've had over 50 businesses and organisations confirming they are directly and negatively impacted by the lack of accommodation for their staff. It's stifling our local economy and our public sector. Our high school recently lost an English teacher who couldn't find anywhere to live and had to move away. The Scottish Government has brought in recently short-term let legislation, but I think it's going to cause more problems than it solves. The government are also consulting on a new national planning framework, but it has a very urban bias in my mind. There's a huge emphasis on 20-minute neighbourhoods, which doesn't really translate well in a rural or island context. So yes, new affordable housing delivery is essential, and we've seen the successes of doing so, although I don't think it can be seen as the main or only solution. We can't just build our way out of this housing crisis. So we are looking at a variety of projects now to kind of chip away from all angles. We are looking to build more houses on Mull, and we're planning to work with local developers to deliver the affordable element of larger developments. We have contacted every single large landowner on the island, encouraging them to release land for housing or new croft creation. We're working with our local council to encourage bringing long-term empty properties back into use. We're looking at how we can apply rural housing burdens to keep houses in the local market. And we're considering our own open market shared equity scheme because the Scottish Government's version doesn't work in an area with very high house prices. We've also been supporting a private landowner to secure Scottish Government funding to deliver their own affordable housing plan. So we're very proud of our houses that we've delivered. I hope it demonstrates that delivering high quality, energy efficient homes is achievable. And actually it should be the standard for affordable housing, and that communities can and should be at the heart of that delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. That was every bit as inspiring as I was hoping it would be. Really,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure everybody in here would agree. There were so many points that you touched upon which were directly comparable with situations communities are facing in Wales, not least
I'm sure
school closures due to overheated private housing market, etc. At the sort of the sharp end of things. So thank you very much. If anybody's got questions for Helen, can I ask you to hang on to them? As I said, through my own sloppy chairing, principally we are running behind. So I'm going to hand over to Martin so we can hear what they've done in Brighton with Bunker, and then we'll throw a combination of questions at Helen and Martin at the end of the session. So thank you. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks, Helen. And I think Darren's gone now, isn't he? But yeah, no, really interesting. I mean, so much in common. So it's great. It's great to be able to, and I'm sure you'll see what I mean in a minute. So it's interesting. But that, I guess, the context for Brighton as well. It's you know, it has a problem here with second homes. We've got a problem here with a lot of homelessness. We've got a massive shortage of social homes. We've got a shortage of homes of every kind. House prices are rising constantly. It's a big overspill place for London. COVID has actually increased that, with people wanting to have more private space, etc. So it's kind of, people are being pushed out of the city, and it's becoming more and more expensive and more precarious. Lots of Airbnb, for example, so houses being taken out of long-term rent for short-term finance, short-term money. So it's a very difficult housing situation. It's also, we are quite, as a city, we are surrounded by the Downs, so there's a shortage of land, so land's at a premium as well. So that's the context. So it's you know, I mean, it's the same as everywhere, right? It's tough. We're all suffering from the same things. Yeah, so I will share my screen now. How do I do that? I go down the bottom, don't I? So I thought I'd give you a little presentation today about a bit about Bunker, who we are, what we've done, and what we're going to plan to do throughout the city. So I'm going to change that to and I make that full screen. Why isn't that full screen? Sorry, bear with me. All right, come on. My poor computer goes really slowly sometimes. That picture you can see there was our first 2 houses that we oh, why is it all gone? Can you see it? My screen's gone blank.
It's gone black. Worst case scenario, yeah. Martin, if you can get back.
Oh, here we go. Ah, excellent, perfect, excellent. Right, so yes, we are a housing co-op. We're in Brighton. Our kind of catch line is building high quality homes for low income people. We formed in 2014, and we are sort of self-building and self-managing homes for Brighton and Hove residents who are in need of affordable housing. We are a zero equity housing co-op, so I don't know if that basically means that when you join, you pay £1, your nominal £1, and when you leave, you get your £1 back. So no one in the co-op actually has equity. So, what is it not letting me do? That's annoying. Why won't it let me go to the next slide? Oh, there we are. So that's one of the reasons why we chose to be a co-op, because actually becoming a co-op allowed us to do something that we couldn't do as individuals. And one of those very important things is basically taking out a collective mortgage, a commercial mortgage, mortgage with the College Building Society. In fact, one of the similarities, 40-year mortgage. I think we all know what co-ops are, right? But basically, there's a kind of official definition of what a co-op is. But what it means for us is that we are a collective of people that come together as volunteers to solve our own housing problems. And we live in our housing, we pay rent to the co-op, we are the tenants and the landlords of our houses, and the rents are set just to pay back all of the different forms of finance on the properties and for maintenance, extraordinary maintenance, etc., etc. So we don't make a profit, we don't make a surplus at the moment, but in the future we will make a surplus. So we don't own our homes as individuals, we do own them collectively, and they can't ever be sold, basically. And we follow the 7 cooperative principles in everything that we do. one of which is to share the co-op message. So who are we? We basically set up in 2014, like I said. We're a group of people that were trying to find affordable housing in Brighton. We're actually all living in private rented accommodation. We're self-employed people, so we were kind of not in enough housing need to ever be housed in social housing, but also not earning enough money to get a mortgage. So private rented sector was kind of all there was available, and that's the case for so many people in the city. And our membership is made up of low-income people who currently live in private rented accommodation. So we've grown slightly. We started off as 2 families. Now there are 10 adults plus some children. We've got a very long waiting list. We build low-cost homes using the most economic and eco-friendly construction methods available to us. And we have a series of small self-built developments over different sites throughout the city. We have an allocations and eligibility policy that's in line with the city's housing allocation policy, which means basically that you have to have a 5-year connection with the city, and there is a earnings cap and a savings cap, and you can't own other property. So you can't own a house that you could reasonably live in. And that's one of the conditions for being leased the land. So here's a little picture of some of us. So our membership has changed over the years because it's quite a long process, and some people's situations change. So they leave and new people join, but the core members are still the same. So this is a little bit about our model. We built on land that's leased from the local authority. We work with the local authority to build land. So the land kind of comes to us through something called the community-led housing pathway in the city. And that's land that the council don't want to build on themselves. They have their own council house building programme, but it's been allocated for affordable housing. So it comes to the Community Land Trust, which is an umbrella organisation for the city, and they basically match that land up with community groups. And we now have 4 different sites throughout the city. We do think that the houses that we build shouldn't just be beautiful, they should also be good for the people that live in them. It's a very interesting thing that Darren said before about the health benefits. So one of the families that lived in our first 2 homes, the son had really bad asthma, and he was having quite a few attacks living in an old Victorian house that was quite damp and quite mouldy. But since they've moved in to their cross-laminated timber home, he hasn't had a single asthma attack. So I can kind of, from experience, back up what Darren said. So we finished our first 2 houses in April 2020. It's quite an innovative scheme, similar to some of the other ones that you've seen today. So I will show you now some of the pictures. So that is it. So I'm sitting in the house now, cross-laminated timber home. That's the outside of the homes. We finished them in May 2020. They're eco homes, they're 3-bed homes, and they're about 100 square meters each. One, I think, is 102, and one is 101 or something like that. So that's above space standards. It's a difficult site. It's called an infill site. As you can see here, the picture on the left is from Google Earth before we did anything. So it was overgrown. It was garages for the houses. It's on a housing estate, 1930s housing estate. And it was totally overgrown. There'd been gates on it. The garages were pulled down in the early 2000s. And it had just become massively overgrown. And you can see on the right, that's the footprint of our houses when we put in the foundations, basically. So the site was allocated for affordable housing. Like I said, the joint venture, the local authorities joint venture with the housing association weren't interested. It's too difficult for a developer. And so it kind of passed on to us. We have the land initially for 99 years, which is good. It was good. And now I'm going to show you some key moments, because I think that's always good. So we basically work really closely with our architects. So you could call it a co-designing process. There's a picture there from when we did our community consultation at the local community centre. And it was, we kind of went through several iterations. We came up with a brief for the kind of homes that we'd like to live in, and also some red lines, what we had. So we wanted to have homes that were cheap to live in as well, so low energy bills. We wanted them to be as eco as possible. We wanted them definitely not to be mouldy, because that was one of the things that we had all had in our other houses. And I think the headline for our brief was cabin in the woods. which was, you might seem an impossible thing to achieve when you're talking about an ex-garage site in the middle of a council estate in Brighton. But, you know, that was our kind of vision, and that's where the kind of building with wood idea came from. You can see here when we first visited the site how overgrown it was. There's actually a sign up, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that said no dumping of rubbish, but actually it had been used as a rubbish dump for about 20 years. And so there was quite a lot to clean up there. It was overgrown, it was full of rubbish, but it was a site. And like I said, land is at a premium, so we weren't going to turn it down, and we just needed to find an innovative solution. So one of the first things we did lots of site visits. We got some investigations done. A friend came along with a drone with the idea of taking some overhead pictures that would then, like some film of the development that we were going to do periodically through the build, so that we'd be able to put this lovely film together. But unfortunately, he forgot to set the homing button on his drone, and it went up in the air and then it flew away, and we never saw it again. And he was panicking, and I think it went to the New Forest because that's where he'd last used it. So unfortunately, we only got one shot from above. So this was a big moment for us when we signed the lease after quite a few years of negotiation. You know, there are these kind of great moments. It's a long, hard slog to do it. Receiving planning permission was a big one. The concrete being poured, getting the keys for the site. You know, there are these kind of highs that kind of that make up for the difficult process that we went through. So the site had to be cleared first of rubbish, and then the hard standing that had been, so underneath all of those brambles and everything was the concrete for the garages. So that had to be all cleared away. As Winston, the dog there, the ground worker's dog. But this was all really exciting. We were going along, and then suddenly it all started moving. We had to dig down, we had to put retaining wall in. Again, that's the sign of the no dumping of rubbish. Unfortunately, we can't enforce that. Otherwise, we would probably have managed to raise a large percentage of our development costs if we could have done it bit by bit. So we got stuck in. So we're a self-build co-op, but we don't build the whole houses ourselves. We had a construction company come and do that, but we got stuck in and did what we can. We did some self-finishing. We cleared up the rubbish. We helped clear the sites. We did some tree stuff. We did some slow worm rescuing. We sanded. There's my partner at the bottom left-hand corner there helping one of the slingers with the cranes when they came to deliver the panel houses. So we were kind of actively involved as possible. We also project managed the project, which saved us some money. So this is a tradition. I think it's a tradition everywhere that you put lucky coins in the foundation. So this is something we did. It was a great day as well. We went along, we put coins under where the doors are going to be. Actually, my dad builds things. He's not a builder, but he said that it used to be that you put a dead cat under there, but obviously that's not. Yeah, our cat wasn't great. Well, we suggested it and he disappeared, so we didn't do that. We went for the coins instead. We did also, I mean, one of those things when you're building is that you have contingency, but also you have to have a bit of money that's there for things you don't expect. And what we didn't expect was to find a bunker. It was a World War II bunker that someone had built in their garden, self-built World War II shelter, amazingly well built according to the ground worker. And it made us joke because we called ourselves bunker. We found a bunker. Maybe we should have called ourselves like horde of, Anglo-Saxon horde or something like that. Because maybe that would have been, yeah. But anyway, so that was fun. Basically what we did is we went in, we had a look, we backfilled it with chalk and concrete because our foundations were going to sit on top of it. So, it cost us maybe a day and I think a couple of grand of concrete. But so it wasn't a disaster. It was just you expect the unexpected, I guess, especially when you're building somewhere that people have lived for a long time, right? So the build, we did lots of checking the plans. There were lots of people waving pieces of paper around. We also told our story because we raised part of our finance, 20% of our finance was raised through loan stock. So that's individuals and other co-ops investing in us. So we invited people to come along and come and see when we got on site and to come and look at the build as we went along, obviously with health and safety considerations. And it's always great because it's not the first thing we want to do. So we want to keep that investment community alive and seeing what their money's doing, but also with the hope that they might either themselves or people they know invest in our next projects. So the big day, one of the biggest days was when the flat packs actually arrived from Latvia. That we bought them direct from the factory in Latvia, cross-laminated timber panels. They arrived like a big, well, giant flat pack piece of furniture, basically. And as you've seen, they come in packs, and then they're broken and they're kind of lifted from horizontal to vertical, and then they're screwed together. And it was an incredible process because it took 6 working days to go from the ground to having 2-3 bedroom houses up on the site, which was incredible. It was incredible to see, and a very exciting 6 days of, you know, when things went from kind of drawings to kind of small models to an actual house size building. And then we, of course we did the inevitable and said, oh, they're really much bigger than we thought they were going to be, but then we'd only ever seen them as little tiny things, but in a good way. Like the windows were much bigger. I mean, it was amazing. So they went up. There's a picture there of the last piece being topped off. So that's the kind of traditionally when the last tile goes on the roof, you have a topping off ceremony. For us, it was slightly larger than a tile. I mean, that piece there weighs a good few tons on its own. And there's our architect at the bottom left-hand corner overseeing things. So we then super insulated those homes. So the homes are all wrapped on the outside, and we super insulated them with wood fiber insulation. So at the top, there's a soft wood fiber insulation, and then it's got Siberian larch cladding on the top of it. So you can see there how much cladding, how much insulation we used. It was all the way down the drive, basically, and out onto the road. It was loads of it. In fact, we had some left over, which we gave to a local eco build because our supplier had over-ordered. Doesn't cost us anything extra, which is great. The windows are triple glazed. We also sourced them straight from the factory. So what we did basically is we kept our building costs down because, as everyone said, you know, building high quality is not cheap. It's the thing that gets value engineered out normally. But we really wanted to do that. And one of the ways we saved money was to buy directly from the manufacturers. So the windows came from the factory in Estonia, where they're made, and then they're exported all over Scandinavia and Germany. And we bought the panels straight from the factory in, like I said, in Latvia. They also supply cross-laminated timber panels to the whole of Europe, and they get packaged up and sold off, like Darren said, under different brand names. But we bought them straight from them, and also we got our wood fiber insulation as well, direct from the factory. So we've saved on agent costs, basically, because a lot of stuff is kind of passed through a series of agents, and each one makes a markup. So the price that you pay in the UK can sometimes is artificially high, basically, and it's not, you know, yeah. Anyway, so we then lime rendered the bottom part of the houses, and we clad the top in Siberian larch, and we have solar panels on the top of the 2 pop-ups there. You can see my neighbours pop up there, bird boxes and bat boxes. So we're like today, you know, we get quite a good amount of sun, and when the sun's shining, we've got basically the electricity heats the hot water, and obviously runs everything. We don't have a storage facility because we didn't have enough money to do that, but we do. We don't also have any heating in the houses at all. We just have heated towel rails in the bathroom, similar to the other project. We've got skylights that you can see to bring some light into the houses. But they're all, yeah, like I said, they're super insulated, they're super cozy, they're super warm. We kept the insides exposed timber. So we got our log cabin, not quite in the forest, but it's definitely a log. It feels like that, and it really is beautiful. It's one of those things that we went and looked at a lightweight steel frame, we looked at timber frame, we looked at lots of different modern methods of construction, you could say, even though like timber frames ancient, obviously. And we chose cross-laminated timber because we liked it in so many ways, but we couldn't visit one. We'd never seen one. We'd just seen pictures of them. And it was only when it was built and we moved in, you realize what it's like to live inside a wooden building. I mean, it smells of pine. It's amazing. It's lovely. It's worth the effort. And it just looks beautiful as well. So we've got wooden floors there. The floor is also super insulated underneath. So we put in a concrete pad, then we put loads of insulation, and then we put a eco-crete screed on the top, and then the floors go on top of that. And also the roofs are super, super insulated as well. So the cross-laminated timber, we built a roof on top of that. So we with layers and layers of wood fibre insulation, then another roof on the top that's got a GRP, which is like a fiberglass roof on top of it. So to keep, you know, the whole house all the way around is wrapped. A similar thing, they're basically passive house standard builds, but we didn't go for the certification because it wasn't really, it would have cost us money and it wouldn't really helped because we didn't need it. Also, we have an ecology building society mortgage, and because we got A rating, so the houses are EPC A ratings, we all know what that means now, and that meant ecology building society would A, lend to us, but also the higher the energy rating of the house, so the more eco-efficient the house is, they take points off your mortgage, which is great. So we've got a variable mortgage, and I think it's 3.65 at the moment. So not bad, 40 years, but obviously with interest rates moving as they are in that direction, it's you know, it's not ideal. So we're actually in conversation now with the local authority about about council on lending from the Public Works Loan Board to replace our mortgages, which will give us a fixed interest rate. And we're looking at 2.5% for 45 years now. And that will obviously mean that our financial viability going forward is a lot stronger, because we won't have to factor in any potential extraordinarily high interest rate rises. So this is a bit of our timeline. I've shared these slides, so you're welcome to, you know, I'm sure you can get them. It took us, like I said, we started in 2014, the site came through in 2015. We went through a long process of getting to planning. We got entered pre-planning in 2016. We got planning in 2017. And we started on site right at the end of 2018, finished the groundworks in 2019, and we moved in 2020. So the actual build itself was about just over a year, but we did have a delay in the middle of it because there was a problem with our mortgage, which is now, with our lease, which is now sorted. So it was quick, but it was not quick at the same time. So we moved in on the 1st of June 2020. They're the two families standing outside their front doors, being very happy with all the work they've done, and so they should be. But now we are looking at these other sites and taking all that learning that we've had from the first one, because that was a pilot scheme, and applying it to other sites. We're going to do the same thing. We work, by the way, with a energy services co-op that provides all the eco-tech for the houses. So they basically came in at quite an early stage of design and gave us different options for what we could do for ecotech in the house. And one of the reasons we went with them is A, because they're a co-op like we are, so they also don't make a profit, but also they're kind of you know, they align with us kind of ideologically, but also they offered us, you know, we were kind of a bit pushed for what we could do. And they offered us a hire purchase agreement, which is fantastic. So we've got a 25-year agreement with them. So they supplied all the tech. Our builders fitted it. So the electrician fitted it. Yeah, sorry.
With sincere apologies, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up over the next minute.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. Right. No worries. No, right. So, yeah, I'll just quickly. So we've got 14 more homes in the pipeline, other sites. They're all similar garage sites. We're going for a similar look. Taking all that learning, they're all going to be similar houses, outside space, shared space, loads of ecotech, low energy, A rated, and so on. And our final one is going to be a little tower of 6 flats in a tower place in Brighton. So yeah, so you got, like, there's more stuff here. There's fun stuff here about our funding, about our rents, and how we achieve all that stuff. But yeah, so sorry, I didn't realise I was running out of time there.
I won't apologise for a thing. It was absolutely brilliant and every bit as inspiring and uplifting a presentation as Helen's. Exactly what we were hoping to get out of the session is, like I said, a bit of inspiration, a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for people to see what can be achieved. You know, we'll keep plugging away at Welsh Government to make the barriers go away. But I wanted to give people a bit of insight into what can be delivered. We've got 1 minute left, so would you guys be interested in, or would you be up for taking questions by email? If people wanted to email me a couple of questions, there was stuff they wanted to cover, as some form of apology for my terrible chairing. I'll open that offer to the group. So yeah, my email address I'll chuck in the chat. If people have questions, send them through to me, and I'll make sure. Oh, there you go. Thank you very much, Claire. I'll make sure they get passed on. And Helen and Martin, I'm sure the same would have been, same suggestion would have come through. Darren wanted to talk further about getting you to present maybe to the Innovative Housing Programme team and inspire them a little bit. So I'll put you both in touch with Darren if that's all right, because we could do with a little bit of the sort of magic touch you guys are demonstrating here in Wales. So we'll have to wrap up at that point. Thank you very much. It's been, like I said, hugely uplifting. You know, from the beautiful shots of sunlight over Marl and Iona to the chirpy egg yellow touches around Bunker. Thank you all. I hope everybody has a lovely afternoon. I'm really grateful to you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.